I think. Out this way.
Ralph Bakshi was a trailblazer in adult-oriented American animation, and this guy set his own rules for what these movies should be. This approach was a double-edged sword, as even his best films can feel like a mix of brilliant ideas and rough missteps. While some considered his films too out there, and sometimes insensitive, the others loved his initial movies because of the creative value they held, and the way he dealt with controversial topics, which is why his movies are the first animated films to get an X rating. So let's cut to the chase and explore all 10 of Bakshi's animated movies. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Again, you do.
Fritz the Cat, 1972. Fritz the Cat starts in Washington Square Park, Manhattan, where hippies are jamming out protest songs. We meet Fritz, our smooth-talking, womanizing tabby, who's there to pick up girls. And pick up girls he does. When some attractive ladies show up, Fritz and his pals try hard to impress them, but the girls are more interested in a nearby African-American crow. The girl's awkward flirting with the crow, laced with unintentional condescension, only makes the crow walk off in disdain. Fritz then swoops in and scoops away the hot ladies. They end up at his friend's place, which was basically hosting a rave party of sorts. With no room anywhere else, Fritz takes the girls to the bathroom, and an orgy of anthropomorphic cats begins. Just then, 2 NYPD pig officers arrive to bust the party. Everyone piles into the bathroom, and Fritz, stoned out of his mind, hides in the toilet. When an officer barges in, Fritz, high and daring, grabs the cop's gun and shoots the toilet, which floods the place and scatters the partygoers. Fritz escapes during the chaos and ducks into a synagogue, where he slips away as the congregation celebrates more weapons being sent to Israel by the US of A. Oh wait, that's oddly similar to what's happening now. Along the way, he accidentally ignites a race riot, and somehow becomes a leftist revolutionary. Fritz the Cat is a biting satire that skewers American college life, race relations, the free love movement, and the hypocrisy of political activists. The film's production was anything but smooth. Robert Crumb, on whose comic strip the film was based, was a leftist himself, and he clashed with the filmmakers over the movie's political stance, which he felt was too critical of the left. Made on a modest budget of $700,000, the film was Bakshi's bold attempt to expand the horizons of animation. At the time, animation was strictly for kids, but Bakshi wanted to prove it could tackle mature, dramatic, and satirical themes that appealed to adults. He aimed to break free from the Disney-dominated animation market, which lacked independent competition. The movie didn't shy away from controversy, and its raw depiction of profanity, sex, and drug use, especially cannabis, which raised eyebrows among the more conservative folks in the animation industry. Some even accused Bakshi of trying to make a pornographic film, as the concept of adult animation was still new and misunderstood. The MPAA slapped it with an X rating, making it the first American animated film to get such a rating, typically reserved for art house flicks. In the end, Fritz the Cat is a gem of a movie that's a must-watch for Bakshi fans and anyone who likes thought-provoking animated content.
I won't play that other because it says old Doc is down.
Heavy Traffic, 1973. The film starts in live action with Michael Corleone, a 22-year-old virgin who spends his days playing pinball in New York City, where he muses over philosophical questions. Soon, the scene transitions into an animated, gritty New York neighborhood. Michael's dad, Angelo Corleone, aka Angie, is a struggling mafioso who constantly cheats on Michael's Jewish mother, Ida. Their relationship is a mess, with the two trying to kill each other whenever they get the chance. Michael, unemployed and avoiding his chaotic home life, dabbles in cartoons and roams the city to soak up its grimy inspiration. He frequents a local bar where he exchanges sketches for free drinks from Carol, the bartender, who happens to be black, something that is important to the larger plot. Things go okay for Michael for a while. The legless shorty kills a patron who abused the transgender named Snowflake, although she enjoyed it because she was a masochist. Nevertheless, the bar's white manager blames Carol for the loss of property, and she quits in frustration. Shorty offers Carol a place to stay, but she, not wanting to get involved with him, tells Shorty she's staying with Michael. Michael lets Carol crash at his place, but the increasingly toxic environment at home pushes Michael and Carol to leave. They dream of moving to California to escape Shorty, who's been stalking Carol since she quit the bar. Meanwhile, Angie wants to kill his son for dating a black woman. When push comes to shove, the humble cartoonist also takes the path of crime, with Carol as his partner in crime. Heavy Traffic is Ralph Bakshi's follow-up to Fritz the Cat, but this time he ditches the talking animals for human characters, which definitely helps in giving the film a more realistic undertone. The protagonist, Michael Corleone, yep, the same name as Al Pacino's character in The Godfather, was a bit of an oddity but didn't really feel off. In fact, I think Heavy Traffic is one of Bakshi's most critically successful endeavors. Bakshi seems to draw heavily from his own Brooklyn upbringing, and he manages to create a gritty, authentic backdrop. Unlike the sharper, more focused satire of Fritz the Cat, heavy traffic takes a more picaresque approach. I mean, our hero is not the most righteous or honest man, but he's still appealing, and so are his adventures. If you want just one reason to watch this one, do it for the outrageous and often over-the-top adult humor. Bakshi gives us scenes with giant breasts, a BBW model adjusting her bra, Michael getting impaled on his own erection, and there's even a scene where a woman goes down on a man. It's crass, shocking, and undeniably Bakshi.
Damn! Fucking black!
Coonskin, 1974. Coonskin starts in a small Oklahoma town, with the local preacher leading a prayer and giving a tour to the kids. Soon, he and Samson plan a prison break to free their friend Randy. As they rush to the prison, a woman stops Samson, who tells him about the price. Meanwhile, Randy and his cellmate Pappy escape and wait for their rescuers. With nothing to do, Pappy starts telling Randy a story about three guys who resemble them, which is what the movie's about. In Pappy's tale, Brother Rabbit, Brother Bear, and Preacher Fox are evicted from their home-turned-brothel and plan to get their due from its new owner. Added into the mix is the sheriff, who discovers his daughter working as a prostitute. After a deadly confrontation, the trio flees to Harlem, only to find it's not what they expected. They encounter Simple Savior, a phony revolutionary leader who stages flashy performances and scams donations by exploiting black oppression symbols. Rabbit and his friends quickly see through Savior's act, and not only does Rabbit steal the donation money, but he ultimately kills Savior to take over his racket. The movie goes on to include several of the typical Bakshi elements, so you can expect a lot of fiery car crashes, heavyweight boxing, homophobia, racist cops, homophobia, mafia, and more. With Coonskin, Ralph Bakshi dove headfirst into controversial waters. Although he aimed to tackle contemporary race issues and paint a vivid picture of African-American life in the 1970s Harlem, it didn't really sit well with the audience. To get it right, Bakshi hit the streets with a tape recorder and interviewed African-Americans about their experiences. Like in Heavy Traffic, he filmed real Harlem scenes, overlaying them with animated characters. The backlash forced Paramount to drop the film, and Bakshi had to re-edit and cut some controversial dialogue before releasing it independently. Despite initial dismissal, the film has been re-evaluated over the years, and is now seen more as a satirical caricature, which is what Bakshi's primary intent was. 40 years later, Coonskin can be given some leeway as a complex piece of work. It's clear Bakshi didn't set out to make something racist or derogatory. He even hired many black animators for the project. Sure, if Coonskin were made today, it would face a lot of backlash, because things have evolved politically and socially, and of course, this evolution has been nothing but positive. But remember, in 1975, the only prominent black filmmaker was Melvin Van Peebles. Bakshi deserves some credit for being a white filmmaker willing to explore a different culture, even if his approach was flawed. However, after Coonskin, Bakshi went more mainstream and delivered movies like Wizards, Lord of the Rings, etc. Wizards, 1977. Wizards is a trippy post-apocalyptic fantasy film that blends magic, mutants, and Nazi propaganda, and pixie hookers in a way only Bakshi could pull off. The story starts with Earth recovering from a nuclear war that left the planet blanketed in radioactive clouds for 2 million years. When the sun finally breaks through, the surviving humans have mutated into grotesque forms, while the planet's true ancestors, trolls, fairies, elves, and dwarves, emerge to reclaim their place in the nearly utopic land of Montagar. It's peacetime on Earth, and we meet Delia, the queen of the fairies, who goes into a trance and gives birth to twin wizards, the gentle Avatar and his brother Black Wolf, who's mutated in all things evil. After Delia's death, Black Wolf tries to take over, but Avatar kicks his butt in a magical duel. Naturally, Black Wolf is forced to flee Montagar, but like any self-respecting villain, he vows to return and let mutants rule. 3,000 years later, Black Wolf is back, and rules the dark land of Scorch. He's got an army of mutants and evil creatures like orcs, goblins, trolls, and even dragons. However, the poor guy's initial attacks on Montagar fail because his troops keep getting distracted. Then, Black Wolf finds an old projector with Nazi propaganda footage and uses it to mess with the minds of his enemies and boost his own soldiers' morale. Meanwhile, in Montagar, Avatar is busy training the president's daughter Eleanor to become a full-fledged fairy. Their peace is shattered when Necron 99, a robot assassin sent by Black Wolf, kills the president. Avatar subdues the robot, reprograms it for peace, and conveniently names it Peace. Avatar learns from Peace about Black Wolf's dream machine, and realizes they must destroy this projector to stop another Holocaust. Now it's not $1 million question, but how would they achieve success? Wizards is as heavy-handed as it sounds, but Ralph Bakshi's hipster lens makes it a little more palatable. Avatar, with his dated lingo like "this has been the biggest bummer trip I've ever been on," is probably my most favorite character from the movie, but I'll have to ignore his outdated attitude. Bakshi's signature crude yet innovative animation techniques from the 70s are on full display display here in Wizards. He jazzes up traditional cell animation with trippy optical effect backgrounds. In the climax, he goes further, mixing live-action footage of airplanes and tanks with the animated battle between Avatar's and Black Wolf's forces. Again, pretty typical of Bakshi. One big issue with Wizards is its inconsistent tone. The film awkwardly swings between action, slapstick, and social commentary, and ends up becoming a bit of a mess. Yet Bakshi's mad scientist approach occasionally hits something exciting, funny, or touching. The Lord of the Rings, 1978. In the early days of Middle-earth's Second Age, the Elven Smiths crafted 9 rings of power for men, 7 for the Dwarf Lords, and 3 for the Elf Kings. But Sauron, the Dark Lord, forges the one ring to rule them all, and sets out to conquer Middle-earth. After Sauron's defeat, Prince Isildur claims the ring, but he's killed by orcs, and the ring ends up at the bottom of the River of Anduin for over 2,500 years. Sauron eventually recovers the 9 rings, and turns their bearers into the dreaded ring wraiths. The one ring is found by Deagle, only for his kinsman Smeagol to kill him and take it. The ring corrupts Smeagol into the creature Gollum, who hides with it in the Misty Mountains. Centuries later, Bilbo Baggins stumbles upon the ring in Gollum's cave and takes it back to the Shire. Later, the wizard Gandalf convinces him to leave the ring for his nephew Frodo. Bilbo, though reluctant, agrees and heads to Rivendell. 17 years later, Gandalf discovers that dark forces are after the ring, and it's time to hit the road and journey to Mordor to destroy it. The film adaptation of The Lord of the Rings wasn't exactly a hit with Tolkien fans. Hardcore book enthusiasts tend to get pretty upset when film versions miss even the tiniest details, and there's plenty for them to gripe about here. A lot of the rich history and mythology that make Tolkien's work so magical were ditched. Still, contrary to the harsh opinions at the time, Bakshi's The Lord of the Rings has its moments. Some scenes, especially the Mirror of Galadriel, manage to retain a surprising amount of the original's depth and power, which is pretty impressive for an animated film that's trying to adapt a story as complex and as rich as The Lord of the Rings. Bakshi's version is far darker and more violently realistic than what people expected from animated films back then. It became very evident, very early, that this wasn't Disney's territory. The movie was pitched as a children's film, so audiences went in expecting something cute and charming, but got hit with a much more complex and unresolved story with a grim, violent edge. Remember that the internet was not a thing back then, and people who didn't read about books or hear about them did not exactly know about the story. It's not a perfect adaptation of the books, but Bakshi deserved credit for making it dramatic and engaging, rather than just a Tolkien-themed tour. Unfortunately, the film flopped, and United Artists dropped the plans for the sequel. However, Rankin Bass, the folks who did the Hobbit adaptation, did jump in to finish the story with the animated TV movie The Return of the King in 1980. American Pop, 1981. In the late 1890s, Imperial Russia, a rabbi's wife, and her young son Zalmi escape to America after the rabbi is killed by the Cossacks. Once they land in New York City, young Zalmi gets roped into the entertainment world by Louis, a performer at a burlesque house. Zalmi's job is handing out chorus slips to help the audience sing along. As Zalmi grows up, he spends more time backstage and starts to soak in the showbiz atmosphere. However, when his mother dies in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, Zalmi is pushed to work full-time with Louis at a small theater. Zalmi dreams of becoming a singer, but puberty hits, and his changing voice throws a wrench in his plans. World War I breaks out, and Zalmi ends up performing for the troops as part of a pantomime horse act. His singing career further spirals down when he gets a throat wound during a German air raid. Back in New York, Zalmi tries his hand at clowning and falls for a stripper named Bella. Determined to make her a star, he gets entangled with mobsters, specifically mob boss Nicky Palumbo. After Bella becomes pregnant, Zalmi uses Palumbo's money to pay for their wedding. Bella starts to find success, but her life is cut short when she opens a package meant for Zalmi that contains a bomb. Their son Benny, an introverted kid and another music buff, starts playing jazz piano. Zalmi convinces Benny to marry Palumbo's daughter. Despite his father's pleas, Benny enlists in World War II, seeking redemption for his family. Tragically, Benny is killed in Nazi Germany while playing Lily Marlene on an abandoned piano. The Nazi soldier listening thanks him before opening fire, killing both Benny and the piano. Benny's wife and their son Tony settle in suburban Long Island, and it is now up to Tony to carry on the legacy of this musical family. But of course, nothing would be easy for the kid. Tony is arguably the most fascinating character in the film. He's a brilliant yet tortured soul, whose weaknesses ultimately overshadow his immense talents. The film is packed with iconic pop culture images and classic 20th century songs, and Bakshi does a fairly good job at weaving all of these elements into the storyline. There are several impressive musical montages that get more pronounced because of the timeless music. All in all, the movie is worth it if you have even a little interest in music or nostalgia for that matter, because Tony carried the film through the late 50s through the early 70s. Hey Good Lookin, 1982. In Long Island, a mysterious man shows a middle-aged woman a black jacket, something that seems to have deep sentimental value to her, and the mysterious man starts spinning a tale about its owner. We're thrown into a flashback to 1953 Brooklyn, where an Italian rebel named Vinny Ginziana leads a greaser gang called the Stompers. His best buddy is Crazy Shapiro, whose detective father named Solly wants to murder him. At an old basketball court, Vinny reconnects with his old flame, Rosie Featherschneider, but Rosie's overprotective Jewish dad doesn't like her meeting him. So like any self-respecting, cruel, and psychotic father, he chains her to a bed. Vinny and Crazy steal a car, spend the night causing mayhem, drinking, playing pool, and exploring the town. They end up at a bar, meet a couple of prostitutes, and sleep on the beach, only to wake up near a group of mobster wives. Crazy makes a move on the ladies, while Vinny stumbles upon a buried dead body. Of course, the elegant mess has just started to take shape. The mobsters soon get alerted, and they beat Crazy, while Vinny escapes and bumps into rival gang leader Boogaloo Jones and his men, who challenge the Stompers to a rumble. Later, Vinny, Roz, Crazy, and Eva go to a party where Vinny announces the upcoming fight, but the gang isn't thrilled. One thing leads to another, and a hallucinating Crazy starts shooting wildly on a rooftop, which leads to a gunfight between the gangs. Boogaloo hides, Sal gets killed, and Vinny fakes his death. Back in the present, the mysterious man finishes his tale. He reveals that he's Vinny, back after 30 years. Vinny embraces her, and the two lovers finally reunite. Originally finished in the mid-70s, Hey Good Lookin was meant to be a hybrid of animation and live action, with the main characters as cartoons against real-life backdrops, but Warner Brothers rejected this version. When it finally hit theaters in 1982, it had morphed into a fully animated feature, except for a few scenes with animated characters over live-action New York street footage. The soundtrack was updated to an 80s take on 50s rock, which didn't always gel with the film's gritty tone. The music clashed with the grubby material, and the plot felt like a Bakshi's Greatest Hits compilation. So there were sharp social observations with broad ethnic stereotypes and surreal set pieces. Despite the compromises, the core of what Bakshi intended with Hey Good Lookin shines through. The film is an anti-nostalgic sketch of racial conflict and awkward romance in 1950s Brooklyn. Bakshi doesn't romanticize the past. Instead, he paints an ugly New York filled with thugs and racists. I would say the movie is a lovable snapshot of a rough and tumble era. Fire and Ice. From their icy citadel, Ice Peak, the sinister Queen Juliana and her son Necron unleash glaciers to drive humanity southward towards the equator. Necron sends his followers to the volcanic fortress of Fire Keep, ruled by King Gerald. Of course, it was a plot to kidnap Gerald's stunning daughter, Princess Tigra, and not a diplomatic mission. In reality, Juliana wants Necron to marry Tigra and produce super babies. Tigra escapes her captors and runs into Larn, a young warrior and the sole survivor of a village decimated by Necron's glaciers. They grow close but are separated when Larn is attacked by a giant squid, and Tigra is recaptured by Necron's minions. Tigra escapes again, only to fall into the hands of the witch Roliel and her son Atwa, who plan to use her to gain Necron's favor. However, the subhumans kill them and take Tigra back to Ice Peak. Necron doesn't want to marry Tigra any longer, but he does keep her as a prisoner. On the other hand, Larn was still on his mission to rescue Tigra and meets Darkwolf, a masked warrior with a personal vendetta against Juliana and her evil son. While Darkwolf fends off Necron's horde, Larn discovers Roliel's remains, which guides him to Tigra. Meanwhile, King Gerald sends his son, Prince Taro, but it does not end well for them. Larn infiltrates Ice Peak, but fails to save Tigra and is rescued by Darkwolf. They head to Fire Keep to inform Gerald. Now Gerald has another dilemma. He has to choose between saving his daughter and unleashing lava to stop the glacier and save his people. With the help of Dragonhawk riders, they assault Ice Peak. Darkwolf reaches Necron, while Larn rescues Tigra from Juliana. Darkwolf kills Necron, but his death causes the glacier to expand violently. Just in the nick of time, Gerald releases the lava, which destroys Ice Peak, Juliana, and the subhuman army. Larn and Tigra narrowly escape the destruction. They come across a wounded subhuman, and while Larn prepares to kill him, Tigra stops him. Fire and Ice is a visually impressive mix of fairy tale and sword and sorcery, nothing that Ralph Bakshi hadn't worked on earlier. Released in 1983, this film is notable for two reasons: Bakshi's attempt to capture a wider, younger audience, and the debut of America's top heroic fantasy artist, Frank Frazetta, who co-produced the film. For its time, Fire and Ice is surprisingly realistic, but it also feels as visually stiff and formulaic as any low-budget sword and sorcery flick. The story is wafer thin, and the characters are your typical cookie-cutter types. However, there's something enjoyable about the filmmakers not trying to make it overtly meaningful. They just want you to sit back and soak in this Frazetta-inspired world. And Tigra's curves. The film's backgrounds and characters, though ambitiously executed, don't always mesh well. Frazetta's steep, phallic landscapes clash with Bakshi's overly sleek cavemen. Having said that, if you need one reason to watch it, do it because Bakshi and Frazetta have combined their brilliant minds and art just this once. Cool World, 1992. The film starts in 1945 in Las Vegas, where World War II veteran Frank Harris suffers a motorcycle accident that kills his mother. Frank ends up in a cartoon-like alternate universe called Cool World, where he becomes a detective for the local police department. 47 years later, we meet Jack Deebs, an underground cartoonist just released from a 10-year prison stint for murdering his wife's lover. While locked up, Jack creates a comic series called Cool World, inspired by his strange visions, the star of which is the super-hot Holly Wood. Holly dreams of escaping Cool World and becoming a real person, a transformation that's possible if Doodles, or the Cool World inhabitants, have with noids or humans. Although Frank and his doodle partner Nails are vigilant, ensuring the dimensions don't mix, things go haywire as Jack is pulled into Cool World and smuggled into a nightclub by Holly and her goons. Ralph Bakshi's Cool World, his first feature in almost a decade after Fire and Ice, ambitiously aimed to be a gritty, adult version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but unfortunately, it fell short, and by miles. The technical execution was uneven. Some characters in this twisted animated universe were unintentionally hilarious and laughable, while others feel flat and lifeless. The integration of 2D and 3D characters is poorly done, which makes the technical flaws glaringly obvious. The film is so ragged and disjointed that it's hard to follow, with plot holes and illogicalities that are tough to overlook. Cool World struggles to establish the basic ground rules for its principle of transference between the animated and real worlds, which again results in a storyline that feels like gibberish. Despite these shortcomings, Bakshi injects the films with bursts of animated creativity, with little explosions of toon action that pop like video game novas. These moments provide some entertainment, but they aren't enough to salvage the overall experience. Last Days of Coney Island, 2015. Last Days of Coney Island is essentially Ralph Bakshi's animated exploration into the underbelly of 1960s Brooklyn. Yep, another take of New York. The film starts with Shorty, who's ranting about a striptease dancer who disgusts him and reminds him of his mother. Now that's something. He flashes back to his childhood and catches his fortune-teller mom in bed with a clown, and in a fit of rage, he murders them both, body parts flying everywhere. Blood and bones. It's all very Old Testament. This also catches the attention of the mafia, and Shorty eventually becomes one of their own. Of course, all animated hell breaks loose after this. Last Days of Coney Island paints a vision of Coney Island as both a refuge for the outcasts and a hellish landscape, punishing those who don't fit into an America gone off the rails. The director discovered the joys of digital workflow, which allowed him to work with a tiny staff and still create a dizzying depiction of Coney Island as a symbol of urban decay. Essentially, this is one of those films that's great in parts, but not so much as a whole. That was all in this one. What was your favorite of all of Ralph Bakshi's movies? And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.